Hello and welcome back to CWU Live. It's been 9 days since the last episode, and it's fair to say a lot has happened in that time. And lots of those developments have been incredibly grim. Over the next hour, I'm going to be speaking to some very insightful guests about the far-right riots and the response to them. First, though, let's begin with a very quick rundown of what we've witnessed over the past 9 days. Now, as you'll now be very much aware, I'm sure, following the tragic killing of 3 young girls in Southport, the far right spread misinformation and interrupted a grieving community by taking part in a riot. Those riots then spread to other parts of England and Northern Ireland. Bricks were thrown at mosques, windows of homes were broken, and most terrifyingly, in Rotherham and Tamworth, hotels housing asylum seekers were set on fire. The far-right riots have left Britain's ethnic minority communities terrorised, and they've also damaged livelihoods, including that of care worker Brendan from Middlesbrough.
Thugs surround a car in Middlesbrough and set it alight. While this was happening to his car on Sunday afternoon, Brendan was in the middle of a 12-hour shift as a carer, looking after elderly people in the town.
So when I came back home, I saw what happened. I just only saw the remnants of it. It was no longer a car, but a scrap. I couldn't even recognize it. I went to the bathroom. I cried because I know how much it took me to be able to save this money and be able to get this. What am I even doing here? That was the question I asked them. What am I even doing here? I'm here taking care of somebody. I'm here taking care of people, making sure they are okay. They are elderly.
Scenes like that in 2024 have shocked all decent Britons. But there have also been glimmers of hope in the way communities have come together. Local people have come out to support those under attack, including Tony Hill, who helped rebuild the wall of the mosque in Southport.
What made you want to come out here today in this baking hot sun?
Well, the thing is, you see it on the news and it doesn't make any sense. You've got a vigil down the road and then you've got this going on.
Yeah.
These have done nothing wrong, so, you know, we spoke to the company we work for and they were coming down, so we just joined them. So, and then, yeah, just try and get it done before someone makes a mess again. No one deserved it, did they?
Yeah. Do you have a message for people who did tear this apart?
Get your facts right first before you start doing stuff. No one else knows, do they? Facebook's a dangerous thing, isn't it? If you're not looking at it right, if you just want an agenda, make sure you get it right first, to be honest. But yeah, it's just no need. Just a community, innit? You can tell why it's a community just looking at everybody here. Everybody's quite diverse, so yeah, it's not good.
And do you reckon you'll get it done today? I don't want to put any pressure on you.
I'm hoping to get it done in the next few hours, to be honest, just in case anybody comes again and want it in place. So, yeah, hopefully in a few hours should be close to being done.
The trade union movement has also stepped up. This was part of a CWU statement released on Monday. So it says, it is the job of trade unionists to deliver for workers and act as pillars of the community in bringing people together. The aims of our union and the labour movement are compromised and weakened if the agenda of race war beats the fight for working class unity. As such, we ask all branch committees to contact local mosques, refugee centres and solidarity groups in order to offer our union solidarity and support on the ground at a time when they face severe intimidation. And last night saw peaceful anti-racist protests take place across the country. This was part of a heartening report from the BBC this morning, which begins in Bristol.
The city had been braced for trouble. So this part of Bristol is where a couple of immigration lawyers are based, whose addresses have been leaked online. And there was a real fear there could be a far-right protest taking place here today. But we've been here the last couple of hours, and there's not a sign of that. Instead, something very different has happened. Thousands of anti-racism protesters, trade unionists, members of the local black and Asian community, students, took over the streets in what was broadly a good-natured evening, but one that sent a message.
I feel ashamed for our country right now. It's just we're not representing ourselves in any sense of a manner that's like admirable at all.
You can see a lot of places are boarded up, so there's been a lot of fear about what could happen, and it just felt really important that we were here to protect our community.
It was a picture repeated across the country. Walthamstow in London saw vast crowds gathered, as in Bristol, to oppose the far right, while there were colourful scenes in West London.
Refugees are welcome here! Refugees are welcome here!
In Sheffield, police had prepared for trouble, but none came. In Croydon, although there were a few arrests, things were generally peaceful. While a march between two mosques in Accrington was greeted by people drinking at the pub. And this was the scene in Newcastle.
Of course, protect our mosques, because we believe this is our house and this is house of God. And I think for them to stand up and really want to go around and try to destroy our mosques is something really heinous.
To talk about the far-right riots and the response to them, I'm joined by Greg Charles, CWU Branch Secretary of South West London, Kate Hudson, who is Head of Equalities and Education at the CWU, and Adam Alarakhia, who is Chair of Leicestershire CWU Branch. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining me. I can't wait to get your insights on all of this. Let's begin with you, Kate, as Head of Equalities. I suppose let's get general statements, actually. What have you sort of made of what we've seen over the past 9 days? I suppose the very bad, and then also some of the more positive scenes we've seen over the past 24 hours especially.
Well, obviously it started with major concerns, worries, disbelief, anger when you saw local libraries being burnt down and attacked. You saw citizen advice bureaus being burnt down and attacked, actually vital services for communities that vitally need those services, that affect children, and just things like just couldn't believe what I was seeing, and worry for my friends, my family, making sure they were safe, having to make phone calls, to tell my son to look out, and be careful. And then you think how many other people are making those phone calls at the same time on that weekend, so a country really, I've got to be honest, a Britain that I didn't recognise at the start. But I've got to say I went to bed feeling far, far happier last night after seeing the response that, the communities coming together, the uprising, the hope and not the hate, so woke up this morning feeling far more, that the world is far more promising and that we can, bring it back together, move forward.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people sort of yesterday evening felt like they recognised the country a bit more than they had over the previous 8 days or so. Adam, can you talk about your sort of experiences over the past 9 days or so?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. It has been quite concerning, just like similar to what Kate was mentioning earlier, that I don't recognise the Britain which we have seen in the last few days. But then I've been contacted by Stand Up Against Racism, and that certain images we've seen and, the solidarity between different people from different background, different races, different religions, that actually gives me back that, positivity. And I always believe in positivity because I want to get rid of this word from our dictionaries, the word negativity, because I don't believe that should exist. It should be only positive. But yes, it was a bit of concerning. And this is a message to those people who are rioting, the people who are on the ground, who are rioting and causing all this damage, the people who are actually pulling the strings. Let me tell you this, none of these people give a flying falafel about what you guys do, because they don't care. They are chucking you under the bus. And one of the images which I saw was about some people attacking Greggs or breaking the Greggs. What are you getting out of this? You keep saying, they are taking our jobs. Well, they took your pastries as well, so you're going to get them back, are you? It doesn't make sense to me whatsoever. Don't be fooled by these people who are in very senior positions. They're there for their reasons. So don't be fooled by these people because they are there for specific reasons and they're using you as scapegoats, basically. And they will be chucking you under the bus. So yeah, very concerning, answering to your question.
And I suppose, who are you talking about when you sort of say these people that don't care about, the people who are actually sort of getting themselves into trouble? You're talking about politicians or social media sort of activists? What's your...
Personally, I believe quite a few people from different backgrounds. Social media activists, also those people who want to create this issue about people against each other. And it starts off with racism, and politicians are, to be fair, they're not vocal enough, in my view. They're not vocal enough in order to challenge these views and say, call a spade, basically. What's wrong is wrong, doesn't matter who does it. So if something has been wrong, something is going wrong out there in the community, then we need to challenge that. And going back to your question, and I apologize for going off the tangent, my view is that people who are running the social media networks, politicians and various other groups who are not even, certain people are not even in this country and pulling the strings from a nice sun lounge, you know exactly what I'm talking about. These are the people who are not on the grounds, and you may do something silly, whoever the rioters are, end up in a prison, and your future is getting messed up. It's not really worth it at all whatsoever.
Greg, I'm going to go to you in one moment. First of all, though, we are going to see a video which you have recorded earlier this week.
There's always someone to blame. In the 30s, Jews were to blame. In the 70s, black people were to blame.
The Empire Windrush brings to Britain 500 Jamaicans.
And right now, a lot of powerful people are saying immigration is to blame.
It is this country and your government who should decide who comes here, not criminal gangs.
Except, of course, it's never the fault of the governments who create misery around us or spoofers that make good money sowing division in our country. It wasn't immigrants who cut back police funding. It wasn't immigrants who privatised the railways and scrapped the buses. Immigrants aren't stopping us from building proper housing. It wasn't immigrants who cut back on our bins getting taken out or shut down our schools. No immigrants let your energy bills soar, and it's certainly not immigrants who run the water companies.
Thames Water fined £104 million.
The only way we'll get through this moment is together, by building a movement that calls for real change. Change that will genuinely improve our lives and the lives of our children. You have more in common with an immigrant who came here for a better life than you do with that millionaire and former city financier who claims to be your voice. The working class represented by a Nigel. Behave.
Are we talking about Muslims here?
We are. And I'm afraid I found some of the recent surveys saying that 46% of British Muslims support Hamas, support a terrorist organisation.
And I don't know about you, but I don't remember any rich, double-barreled name men sitting on Twitter ever having my back. They won't be backing you when you're making another cut to the family budget and they're counting their millions from a sunny villa in Cyprus. The only people who ever benefit from the division of the working class are those in power and those with money. The challenge for the rest of us is not to fall for their rhetoric and their division. We are one working class. Join a union, bring your workplace together, bring your community together.
That's a very powerful video, Greg. And I suppose the message you're giving there is to try and counter, I suppose, the argument people make where they say, if you're working class, if you're struggling, blame the immigrant. And I suppose I want to know from you, sort of, have you met people who you think are being persuaded by those kind of lines from the likes of Nigel Farage or, say, Stephen Yaxley-Lennon?
Unfortunately, yeah. I mean, it's there are individuals out there that I know very well that I wouldn't say fall for the rhetoric, but they get drawn into that kind of way of thinking. I believe there's been a complete chasm within the political system over the last decade, if not longer, caused and created by a government that wasn't doing the right thing, which allowed individuals to jump into that space and then draw in other individuals through influences, whether it be football, whether it be other walks of life, and so that they've been drawn in. But I wholeheartedly believe that butting up a strong argument against, as that video has shown, is that we can change their minds. It's needed now. The time is right and proper for other individuals to get involved and change that narrative and change it to something that is for positive. As Adam said, it's got to be positive. We're out of this negative situation. Positivity has got to come out of it. And I wholeheartedly believe if we do that, We'll get those individuals that have been drawn that way. We'll change their minds and we'll draw them back to the positive way of thinking and the less diversive way that's been created by, as I say, the political system over the last decade or two.
Yeah, and you've talked about politicians there, but obviously there's also a role for sort of people on the ground having conversations. And before we went live, I learnt you're a Millwall fan.
I am.
And obviously Millwall comes with a certain reputation. And I was sort of wondering your experience as an anti-racist trade unionist, being a strong Millwall fan, sort of like what kind of conversations do you have? I suppose actually I should begin. Do you think Millwall deserves the reputation it has?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Look, reputations are built over decades. It's a long cultural, historical way of thinking. I do believe that the media has a presence within that because it suits their narrative. If there's an issue at a football game, whether it be Millwall, whether it be another football team, that they can pin all of their issues within the society on that one football team and label a group of people that they're hooligans as such. But no, absolutely not. And Millwall and other football clubs and other organisations have been doing a lot of work over the past few years to actually change and develop a different narrative and a more inclusive way of thinking. Even going to places like Millwall, going to Bradford, and that, I've worked closely with groups of people that are bringing people together. Again, that positive way of thinking, rather than the narrative of negativity. Yeah, as Adam says, get rid of that word. Be more positive, and people will be, not to put too, highfalutin word on it, but they'll be enlightened that it's not the way that people act sometimes in the way that they believe that people expect them to act. You got to tell them that that's not the right way of acting, and they'll understand that, and they'll act in a different way. Again, we've got to build a positive outlook coming out of such a negative situation.
We won't spend the whole conversation talking about Millwall, don't worry, but I'm just fascinated by this actually, because you mentioned hooliganism, but also Millwall had a reputation as being a club with a fairly racist fan base. But obviously now it is, it's a South London club in a very multicultural area. So presumably is the fan base now fairly multicultural as well?
Absolutely.
So that's just a completely outdated idea of Millwall.
Yeah, as I say, it is the media narrative that they like to pin predominantly on Millwall. But yeah, there's so much work. A few years ago, Family Club of the Year, the EFL Family Club of the Year, you wouldn't get that title if things hadn't changed. And there was more inclusivity, families, diversity. The face on the terrace has completely changed as well. So, yeah, again, a positive message coming from such a negative narrative that's been built by politicians.
I'm having my prejudices challenged on the panel today. I still had in my head nobody likes us and we don't care, but apparently that's incredibly... Oh, you still sing that?
We still sing that. But it's more football based.
Right, okay.
Nothing personal.
It's nothing personal.
Kate, I want to sort of know from a practical basis, obviously you're head of Equalities and Education for the CWU. When a situation like this happens, whereby, over the past few days we've seen some horrific scenes of racial hatred, violent racial hatred. Obviously lots of people around the country terrified, lots of them presumably your members as well. And I suppose, what have the past few days been for you? What have your priorities been? What have your experiences been?
So straight away, priority on Monday was around the statement, departments working together, heads of departments working together through the GS and comms, to make sure we get that out and deliver a strong message from us, the CWU. But also we've had members that have contacted the department who are concerned about going to work. We have a lot of members who work out on the street, work outside office environments, so very concerned about what they may be experiencing when they're out there. We've never had that before, which is a real concern, but it's talking that through with them, letting them know that we're here, speaking to the employer about their concerns, etc. How to tackle, we've actually had as well some members contact us around how to tackle the conversations that they know are going to be happening in the workplace, and not necessarily wanting to get massively into it, but not wanting to not say anything. So we've directed them and put on our website some information and education around that to help our members. So yeah, just general conversations, concerns, and just talking as a department on how we're going to keep picking up some of these conversations now and moving it forward in some of our events over the next couple of months, and talking about having honest conversations and talking about some of the key issues that have been pulled out of what's happened over the last week or two.
Okay. Adam, can I talk about sort of your experiences? Obviously, you're a branch chair, you're a Muslim man, and you're from Leicestershire. I know there were riots in Leicester on the weekend, weren't there?
Yes, that's right. Yes, there was last Saturday. There was some riots, or some people from far right background came along. He didn't escalate as bad as some other cities and towns, but he has raised a lot of concerns in the community overall. And where are we actually going with this? So we have managed to work with the police force to actually ensure that there is safety for the community. One thing which I did yesterday, which I never actually thought I'll ever do, because my view is that, look, you got to carry on living. You can't just stop living. My son rang me yesterday and he goes, "Dad, can I go for a bike ride?" And very, very reluctantly, although, in fact, I initially wanted him to let him go, but I was concerned. He's only a 14-year-old lad. And I was really concerned that if he does go out and something was to happen, because there was a lot of planned marches or riots, far rights had planned about approximately 40 of them. And I couldn't let him go. I actually said to him, "Look, my son, I'm sorry, but I can't let you go out at this time, especially with all these things going on." So he has caused a lot of concerns. But like I said previously and before as well, that let's change this into positive, where we are there. There is a lot of organizations working together. I've just been contacted for a speech on this Saturday. On my way here, I was contacted, and I'm planning to actually arrange that and also attend that rally, which is organized by Stand Up to Racism. And hopefully we can send a strong message saying that it doesn't matter what you guys do, whatever your background is, we are going to stand together and we will ensure that you don't divide us. So that is my message to everyone, basically.
And do you get that sense? Because I suppose there's two narratives about these things, isn't there? Where these riots are just caused by this tiny minority of outsiders who come in and cause these troubles, and then the other narrative is sort of like, oh, you didn't realise that different people in your community had these hateful views. And I suppose, do you still feel like your community is pretty much anti-racist and united, and this was this small minority of yobs who just tried to upset it and ultimately failed?
The answer to that question is, to be honestly speaking, I do believe there's small minority, but very much concerning. There's certain people who hold these views who are not out there out there, where in the public domain, if you want to call it. And their support is increasing to the extent that some people who are certain organizations who would normally speak against racism or challenge racism, I'm getting to see certain people's views are changing from those backgrounds, to the extent of some trade unions as well, trade union members who have got these far-right views. And that is quite concerning, although it may seem like a very small minority. But if we don't challenge this and if we don't deal with it now, God forbid, things can get worse. Hence, it's important for us to actually all unite together and challenge these people. And you know what? Everything, in my view, everything starts from a dialogue. Let's talk to each other. Even if you are from the far right background, you don't understand certain people, you don't understand Muslim community as an example, come and speak to us. Come and talk to us. I have regular conversations with people who are clearly, they've told me I'm racist. I don't like you, Adam. They've actually said that to me. And after the conversation, their views changed. Not because we've had kebab together or samosas together, but the dialogue has led them to actually understand what the reality is, what is Muslims all about. We're not out there to terrorize the world. Yeah, we are out there as peaceful community. We are out there to work with everyone. We are integrating. Muslims' contribution in the UK is over £30 billion in the society. Muslims work in NHS. Muslims are contributing charity-wise. Over £100 million every year Muslims contribute towards charities, which is 4 to 5 times more than an average British person. So it's important for us to have this dialogue. Let's talk, let's sit down and discuss it, rather than just assuming things and then making your own mind, oh, this is what the Muslims are about. Muslims are very polite and very peaceful people. So let's have a chat, let's have a discussion. Your views, I guarantee your views will change if you talk to people, and have a dialogue with each other.
And I suppose lots of people, something I hear and something I find actually, in where I live in Hackney, is sort of finding an excuse to talk to people isn't always the easiest thing to do. Because there's, you don't just go up to someone in the street and say, let's have a conversation. And I suppose you've got a role as a branch secretary. I'm wondering sort of what would your advice be to someone who thinks, I actually want to know a bit more about the people I live around. I'm up for having these conversations, but how do I just start a conversation with my neighbours or with the people I work with? What would be your advice?
The best thing is approachable attitude. I think not all of us, of course, some people may not have that view, but as many people, if you have an approachable attitude and where we're welcoming, sometimes people struggle to even say hello to each other. People will struggle to say good morning to each other. If you're having an approachable attitude, then naturally you've already given that person the indication, you know what, I'm happy to talk to you. Smiling at someone. One of the, for those people who want to learn, one of the prophets, Prophet Muhammad's peace be upon him, saying is that smiling is charity. So just smiling at someone in itself gives you that indication, hang on, this person, I can have a chat with them. So message out there in the community, doesn't matter what background we come from, white, blue, brown, green, as an Incredible Hulk background. It doesn't matter what background you come from. Let us work together. Let us be there. Even if you're hesitant, just have that approachable attitude, and that will make massive difference and assist us in breaking these barriers.
And Greg, we read sort of part of that letter, not a letter, I suppose, a statement, which was co-signed by you, Kate, about sort of encouraging CWU branches to reach out to mosques and sort of other institutions and ethnic minority communities. I suppose, could you talk about whether you've seen that happening, what sort of you've felt able to do over the past few days?
Yeah, so as soon as the statement came out on Monday, we was able to get that out across all our branches, all our units, all our members, and I mean that's the positive side of social media. The platforms that we have, we can actually instantaneously get documents out and statements out. That's the positive side. Obviously the negative side, we're not going to talk about negativity, but the positive side is
Thank you, Greg.
that it gets out there. I'm learning. But so we got that straight into the hands of our members, and then I paid a visit to my own office, Wandsworth delivery office, and I've got a very, very close friend of mine in there, Pakistani, Muslim faith, religion, and I had a great conversation with him, and he was thankful that the union had taken this stance straight away. He took it so positive that it made such an effect on him that he came straight up to me and said thank you, but then shared the effects that the last few days had on himself and the family and his children as well, and the fact that he's lives in Tooting. It's a very diverse, multicultural community area within London, and they were frightened to leave the house. The wife, the kids, and he was concerned more for them than he was for him travelling into work. So just talking to him, reassuring him that the people around him, the community that is within the CWU was there for him, and offers of connecting within the mosque and visiting people. I mean, it might be controversial, but when I say community, I don't like to pigeonhole different sets of people within community. Community for me is where you live, and it doesn't matter what colour skin you've got, what faith, what religion you follow, you're part of one community. And I think the narrative that we've built up over so long now has actually built barriers in. You've got a Muslim community, you've got an Indian community, you've got a black community, and I'm thinking they're not. It's one community, and I think again that's something that we need to develop within a conversation through trade unions and leading the way and getting that into the political arena as well, and get more, politicians talking about actually breaking down some of the barriers that Adam just spoke about, which is actual words as well. Words are barriers. Words create barriers. So again, but speaking to my friend, I'm not going to mention his name, but he knows who he is, and he'll be watching tonight. They are frightened. They are scared. But there are positive elements coming out of it, and and together, working together, we'll move things forward. So that's a snapshot of some people on the shop floor, basically.
And Kate, I can see you.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in on both points from Adam and Greg. I completely agree with the conversations and the approach. I think what's happened in this phase is a new phase with, I know we're trying to stay on the positive, but we have to be honest about the things that we need to target and look at to move forward. But the people hidden behind cameras on social media, it's not that easy to have those conversations with. But I think we need to take the toxicity out of some of this so those honest conversations can happen and have to happen for us to get honest facts and us to move forward in a positive way. But I also wanted to just go into Greg's point about community, which again, completely agree with everything that Greg's just said, because actually when you go into a community, and we've been doing quite a bit of work on this in the CW in quite a different way, but if you break down race and class, we're all actually after the same thing: good jobs, good standard of living, good school for our kids, and that's why when you say community, and it is one community, that's why it's important to have these conversations, to have that education for us to move forward in a positive way.
Thank you.
You're so persuasive. No one can end a sentence now without saying in a positive way. I can see why your conversations are effective. Let's go to some comments which are coming in via YouTube. So Secret Squirrel says, TUC, so the Trade Union Congress, should have been more proactive. The right set up GB News to spout their slant on the news. TUC should have done similar. I'd say maybe the CWU had taken the lead with their media platform. Bandafla Podcast says, proud of the CWU for standing against the Nazis and fascists. Carl Pinnell says, government and media are a massive part to play in the divide, in my opinion. Left, right, middle, whatever, need to all stand to get the MPs to do their job properly. Fake news sells, real news doesn't. Erin Massey says, Northern Irish region attended the Northern Irish Congress of Trade Unions rally today outside Stormont. Great turnout, with one message: we stand together for our children's future and demand action from our assembly. There's actually some really scary scenes, weren't there, from Northern Ireland over the past few days. So great to see the Northern Irish Congress of Trade Unions is turning out to challenge that. And Carl Pinnell says, oi oi, Adam led my first union course. Great, funny guy.
We haven't mentioned that Adam's one of our CW tutors.
Would you remember Carl Pinnell? Was he a good student?
To be honest speaking, the amount of people I've taught, I can't remember, but I apologize first of all for not remembering. But thank you very much for that comment. But now that you've said this, yes, you are definitely our best student. Definitely.
Are we going to go to a guest at this point? Yes, perfect. So talking to sort of trade unionists strengthening communities and finding opportunities to talk to people, I suppose. We're now going to be joined by Paul Chadwick from the CWU, who is also the trade union liaison officer for fans supporting Foodbanks in Liverpool. Thanks so much for joining us, Paul. Let's begin by can I get you to explain what is fans supporting Foodbanks? What does it do? I can't hear Paul. I wonder if anyone else can, or is it... One moment. We'll go to Paul when we get the chance. While we're just sorting out that line. Let's go back to some of these things. No, we got him. We got him. Paul, we got you on the line, have we?
You can hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. That's perfect. My first question to you was to sort of explain what Fans for Foodbanks do.
Yeah, well, basically, they were formed in 2015 by three individuals, three trade unionists, Ian Byrne, who's now the MP for West Derby, Dave Kelly, and Robbie Daniels. And they started collecting food outside Goodison Park. and then it moved on to collecting food at Anfield, and it sort of built up from there. Now we supply up to, well, over the last 4.5 years, we've supplied 400,000 people with food in the Liverpool City region, and we've basically gone further to other areas like Manchester, Newcastle, and Glasgow.
That's really interesting, really, really impressive. And I suppose you're a very interesting person to talk to at the moment, because the riots, of course, I mean, tragically started in Merseyside. So in Southport, of course, I mean, it was after the tragic killing of 3 young girls, absolutely horrific event, which was then, you know, disgracefully taken advantage of by the far right, spreading their lies. And I suppose I wanted just to hear your perspective as someone from Liverpool, from Merseyside, what the past few days have been like in your part of the country.
I would say it's very similar to everybody else. You know, we woke up to the terrible news in Southport, which I live in the north of Liverpool, which isn't too far from Southport, and we woke up to the news, which was dreadful. And then, of course, we've seen the far right leaping on top of this and trying to divide communities. We've seen some terrible scenes over the last week. I mean, we could sit here and talk for the next hour of some of the horrendous bits of film that have been shared on social media. But I still believe that the strength is through the community, through the trade unions. And I think after last night, I think we all feel a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, last night was sort of a real, I think, moving moment where people came together to say, this is not what we're about at all.
Yes.
I suppose in this discussion, we've been talking about how people can strengthen communities, can sort of speak to people from different parts of their community, from different backgrounds. And I suppose I wanted to know from your experience whether fans supporting food banks, does that mean you've sort of felt in a stronger position to say, you know, I know the people of this area, we're not like this?
Well, when we collect food, usually at match day collections, although we do collect at other events as well, people give us food. We never ask what religion they are. We don't look at what colour they are. Well, we just accept food. When we give food out, it's exactly the same. So we see it as a way of speaking to everyone within the community. When people see what we do, they always like to join in. They see us as a family, as an extended family, and I believe that working through the community this way is one good way to connect with people that really you don't know. Football is like a universal language. I know, Michael, I know you're not a fan of football when I watch Nevada, but football is like a universal language, and you do manage to speak to people who normally probably would turn their nose up at a trade unionist speaking, but they engage with us more, and they see the goodness that people do within the community, and it can only be a good thing to move forward.
I blame my dad for me not being that into football, because he gave me Sheffield Wednesday as a team. You know, it wasn't much to work with. Paul Chadwick, thank you so much for joining me and for all the amazing work you do in Merseyside and in the regions nearby.
Thank you.
I think we're now going to be joined by someone else who does a fantastic community project. Yes, brilliant. But you need to move up my auto cue a little bit, so I remember the name of the organisation. I'm joined by Joe Chlebik, who runs a gym called 0161 Community in Salford and Manchester. Thanks so much for joining us, Joe. Now, I understand the gym you run is sort of all about bringing different communities together. Could you talk about the gym?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, we started 0161 Community as an organisation many, many years ago. And the very first thing we did was about providing opportunities for young people and for communities. So we did a lot of stuff through boxing and art. What we kind of realised from a very, very early kind of age when we started doing the activities, that basically no matter where you're from or who you are, people, one, like to punch each other in the face, and two, like to play football generally. So they were a lot of the stuff that we focused on. But the gym itself now is in Swinton in Salford, and the big part of it is just having a space where anyone can come and use the gym, regardless of where you're from, who you are, your capability at the gym in terms of what activities you might have done, what sports you might have done, whether it's none or loads. and that actually we keep the barrier of entry for people coming to the gym as low as possible. So we do our classes for super cheap, but one of the things that we've always done is to never turn anyone away from any classes, whether that's kids or families or whoever it might be, to make sure that everyone can come and use it as they please. And not only that, but I think if you look generally over communities, not even just the last few years, but the last kind of 5, 10, 15 years, community spaces generally kind of closed down. You know, the only places that people can really go to are like the library, even though the government is doing their best to close a lot of them, especially over the last few years. So the gym is also a space not only for people to come and do sporting activities, but actually a place where people can just come and chat and kind of be as well. So where the kids are doing an activity, parents can kind of sit there and chat. And for us, that was always quite a big thing, that we'd had a lot of parents that from different backgrounds that often would never ever speak to each other because they just wouldn't, for whatever reason. You know, I'm not here to judge that, but that if their kids are doing stuff together, then they'd inevitably just stand there and end up talking to each other. And then, you know, a lot of that is realizing that actually we're all being shafted by the same people, isn't it? So
yeah, that's amazing, actually. I always thought sort of like the biggest, sort of from my experience growing up in East London, that sort of the biggest barrier to racism was everyone going to the same schools, like comprehensive education. I was like, how could anyone sort of end up racist after growing up like this? But I suppose, you know, there will be some communities where it's not quite as mixed as that.
Yeah.
How did the gym, I mean, it sounds, to me, sort of starting a gym where you've got, it's very inclusive, you don't have to pay that much money to join if you can't afford it. How does this work? How did you start this? It sounds like a real difficult project to get going to me.
Yeah, it is. That's the long and short answer of it. It's really hard. So we try and raise as much money as we can and try and get funding wherever possible so that we can keep things as low as possible. Ideally, what we would do would actually offer more and more classes and offer them all for free, so that there's no barrier of entry for people coming, because what we have and what we see is whole families coming. So the young people will go to that class, then the parents will come to another class, and so on and so forth. And obviously, even if it's cheap, that does add up over every week, especially in a cost of living crisis and everything's more and more expensive, it becomes hard. So we do try and just kind of raise money and look for regular donations to try and keep a lot of the gym going. Everyone at the moment who does stuff there does it on a volunteer basis. And then what we're trying to do moving forward is offer more kind of mentoring for young people. And I think, especially looking at what's happened in the past week, I think we would be somewhat remiss to not kind of to look at it as a flash in the pan moment. And the fact is that there were obviously a lot of far right people involved, not only in what happened in Southport, but across the rest of the country, but also that a lot of people there wouldn't have been and were just angry generally. And I think if we don't kind of acknowledge that and realize that actually there are whole generations of people, especially young people, but not necessarily only, that are just angry about life, because unfortunately the situation for the majority of people is bad, you know, and that we can offer somewhere where we can talk to. Someone mentioned it before about having a conversation with people. And I think there are a lot of places and a lot of organizations that stayed away from doing that. And I think being able to offer somewhere where we can have a conversation with young people, whether that's through sport or through the gym or through whatever, and actually have people from, you know, the gym's open to everyone. It doesn't matter where people are from or who you are, that we can have those conversations and realize that it's not, you know, so whoever who works down there who looks different to you, that's the problem, or that we hate, but that actually we're all being kind of shafted along the same lines and the same reasons. So I know that wasn't really what you asked, but
no, I mean, it's
I was just following on from what we said. And the gym was hard to set up, it was, but what we realized, we did loads of food and like community support stuff similar to Paul. We've done loads of stuff like that in the past. But what our main focus is now is doing kind of the work that's bringing people together and chatting to people and giving people opportunities, whether that's outside of traditional education or outside of traditional work, to be able to provide that opportunity and space for people to kind of not only come and empower themselves, but chat and get stronger physically and mentally.
I suppose I wanted to end by asking you sort of questions specifically about boxing, because I suppose when people have seen sort of rioting over the past few days, obviously some of the people taking part, a lot of the people taking part are on the hardened far right. These are sort of ideological fascists, essentially. And then one idea is that some of the people joining just, you know, they got pent up anger, you know, they wanted to go out and sort of break some stuff. And I suppose, have you found that boxing, for the people that come to your gym, can be a real way to sort of release anger in a more sort of productive and constructive way?
Yeah, massively. I think as well, if you look at any boxing gym, any martial arts gym generally, you will see people of all creeds of life and all races in basically any martial arts gym ever. So I think it provides a good space for people anyway, in terms of you kind of leave everything out the door and just get on with your training and speaking to people, and everyone comes in there at a very level playing field. And inevitably, yeah, it's a much better way to, you learn discipline, you learn respect, you do just let out a lot of that anger and kind of that aggression and pent-upness that people will feel. Because actually, I think as well, if you look at the demographic of where a lot of these riots happened over the last week, the majority were in heavily deprived areas. And, there is a correlation there. So, there is, and the anger that was shown over the past week was obviously shown at the wrong people and horrific in so many ways. But there is also a lot of things for people to be angry about, especially young people that feel somewhat lost in their own communities. And, that's a multitude of reasons that we've got to this point. And actually, through community organising, through trade unions, through food banks, through community groups, and just bringing people together and providing opportunities and support and chatting to people and providing tangible options to kind of escape what they face on a day-to-day is how we create a community that can build out of that.
Joe, thank you so much for speaking to us this evening. And I mean, it sounds like really, really inspiring, really, really sort of powerful, useful work that you're doing. So thank you for that as well.
No worries.
Let's get my thoughts from you guys. I mean, I'm feeling quite inspired by both of those calls.
Definitely.
Do you want to?
Yeah. Going back to Paul and Joe's contribution towards the community, this is how these conversations start, where we get people involved. We have quite a few food banks in Leicester as well. Some of the mosques provide food banks, and you get people from various backgrounds who have been affected. To be completely honest with this, that I mean, I'm always honest, but just to a normal phrase, completely honest about this, that we get people who are in really nice jobs as well, but unfortunately, due to the financial crisis everyone is going through, they actually come to the food banks. And so well done to Paul for what you guys are doing. And I think there's more people who need to be, hopefully, eventually we'll come off this situation where we don't have to have food banks, because everyone is in that situation where they don't need to use food banks. And then again, Joe has touched on with regards to the gym. As you can tell with my physique, I do frequent gym quite often, and I'd like to increase that. But what you've actually come up with is such an amazing thing, and I might get in touch with you to actually specifically start something up in Leicestershire, and then eventually support. Maybe we can have a few branches throughout the country where we can have that facility, where if you can't afford to go to the gym, there is that facility. You don't have to pay, but use the facilities. So yeah, thank you very much, and congratulations to both Paul and Joe with regards to what you guys are doing. And there's more people needed like yourselves. So we do need to, I think CW need to invest on a bit of cloning machines so that we can get more Joes and Pauls out from you. So yeah, thank you very much from the community and from us. Thank you.
And I suppose you mentioned there's sort of food banks at your mosque, and I suppose there's one way of looking at outreach from a mosque is to say, there's misunderstandings about Muslims. We need to sort of have outreach so that people can learn the truth about us. Also, I suppose, something that I think often gets said about modern Britain and sort of modern life everywhere really is that lots of those institutions where people met have declined. So the church, it used to be the case that lots of people go to the church every Sunday and they'd sort of meet their neighbours, etc. I think lots of people, there's some good things about the sort of the fact that we're in a more secular society, but also people are a bit more lonely. And I suppose, there's a real opportunity, isn't there, for mosques to, and all places of worship, but to be this place where people can meet and they can sort of support each other and get to know each other and feel a bit more part of a community.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, the mosque, which is the specific one which started off initially, and there's a few other places as well, which have got the food bank facility. But this particular mosque, which is initially, this good 10 years, over 10 years ago now, when they initially started, people from the far right, they put a pig's head on the door. They started challenging, they started attacking people who are visiting the mosque. And this mosque had already had this view and vision that, look, we are there to serve the community. It doesn't matter exactly what my brother Greg from My Another Mother, who said that it is a community, it doesn't matter what background you come from, even if you don't believe in a religion, we should have that facility. So when this food bank started, the same people, although he wasn't thingy, but he was well known, that the same people who were attacking or putting certain things towards the mosque, they're the same people who actually become the good friends of them, of that mosque, and, you know, supporting to the extent that actually supporting and assisting with the food bank facilities. So, you know, that's all starts, everything starts with the dialogue. Everything starts, look, we're brothers and sisters in humanity, and we need to work together to make this world a better place. So, yeah, thank you for that.
And Kate, I'm not sure if the CW is currently working on a cloning machine. But I suppose, you know,
who would be cloned?
Yeah, we've heard about these sort of very inspiring projects and sort of how we'd like there to be more of them. I suppose, what do you see the role of the trade union movement and the CWU in things such as that?
Well, we're in every fibre of community, aren't we? We've got our branches out there that then feed into our regions. We have got structures that run through the heart of our communities, and we know we have so many representatives and members out there that are, you know, involved in these projects, whether it's with youth and younger workers or with the food banks and the amazing work that Paul does. This happens across the country from a CWU perspective, and that's part of the work that we've been doing, as I was saying earlier, where we work with an organisation called Journey to Justice, and we've been going out to regions and breaking down the conversations around race and class. But also, when we're out in the regions, we're saying, come talk to us about what you're doing in the community and how we can start to support that and how we can broaden that and maybe take that message to other regions and other branches. And it looks at, you know, our anti-racism framework in a completely different way than we've done it before. And the feedback that we've got from it has been very positive. And again, I think it's vital, going back to Joe, young people, I'm always concerned, and I know we keep going back to social media, but it's such a big thing now. You know, it's so important to get young people together and talking, because there's too much of just staring at a screen, and that's what concerns me again with the far right rhetoric, you know, with algorithms and stuff like that. And I'm not a big social media user for all my own reasons, but, you know, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, you click on one thing purposely or by accident, and then you will get a stream of the same thing following through. And when our children are looking at this on their phones or their iPads, who's behind them questioning and talking through what they're seeing? And I think that's why it's important for community centres and places like Joe, you know, the boxing place, where it can be questioned, questions can be asked, and it can be talked through.
Yeah, and especially where if you're offering something where Andrew Tate was one of the people who spread some of the worst misinformation videos that sort of millions and millions and millions of people saw. And obviously he's got big by providing something which some people are looking for, you know, young men looking for purpose in life. And obviously he's giving them horrific, terrible answers. But it is really important there are institutions that can offer an alternative to, I mean, especially if we're looking at the riots over the past few days, it is mainly young men or older men, right? So having an outlet for young men is really important here,
yeah, and I do think that's part of our drive now as a movement as well, is to look at fake news, look at the misinformation, provide safe spaces to talk about the facts, to have open conversations like Adam was saying earlier. I definitely think that's something that we should be pushing out and moving forward through our branches out in the communities.
Greg, my feeling from part of this conversation is I feel like, God, I should have worked a bit harder at being a decent football player when I was younger, but that ship has sailed. I'll have to find a different way to build community.
Comment on one of, and I'm so pleased to hear that there is a new, different way of looking and countering and spreading the anti-racist message. For too long, I think we've stagnated in the way that we, as trade unions and as communities, actually go against that narrative that has been built up for however long. It needs something new. If this is the turning point, if this is the catalyst, and I'll bring it back to Adam, the positive side, it's got to be now. And listening to Paul and listening to Joe and and seeing other elements that's going on out there in communities. I mean, I live just down the road from one of the biggest mosques in Europe, down in Morden. And they do a hell of a lot in the community, and I see them every year going out into the community. The problem is there's still that barrier between they're seen as one separate part of the community and then there's another separate part and there's another. We've got to educate, and when I say educate, I don't mean sitting down and trying to teach someone a lesson. I mean, there's so many ways. I mean, Jim, that's education. That's educating the youth. You know, even going down to, dare I say, you know, the mayor has now in London, the Mayor of London has said we need to be putting more youth centres and, you know, organisations out there to actually get our kids back into, you know, where they can learn about people and different ways of living within their own communities. I had that when I was a kid, you know, through the 80s. You know, I was a kid of the 80s, and believe me, in the 80s, to some extent, it was even worse than what we've seen now. It took me back to the 80s, but because I went to youth centres and I mixed and I integrated and I was educated because of that, then it formed my opinions and it formed me as a person, that there isn't, you know, different ways of looking at people. It goes back to, who are we? We are working class people. We want the same things. We want a good job, we want good transport, we want good NHS, we want good communities to live in, we want good schools so our kids can be raised properly. We have got an opportunity now to do something about it and change the way that we've not dealt with it in the past in the right way. We need to formulate a different way. You know, and bring trade unions with it and other organisations, and I will say football clubs as well. They're doing a lot of work in communities these days, you know. And you know, the last thing I'll say, Millwall Football Club has been one of the first to organise equality, diversity, inclusive committees, going out in the communities, bringing the community together, all of the community under the Millwall Football Club banner. It's about education. And a new way of thinking, and you know, we can do something about it. You know, it's been a terrible time, but literally we can do something about it. And if this is the time, this is the moment, we will.
I want to go to the Millwall. I'll talk to you when we go off air.
More than welcome.
Greg, Kate, and Adam. I don't know if it was your positivity, Adam, but I've come away. You know, I feel like we've ended up with quite a positive conversation from a pretty dreadful situation.
Thank you.
But thank you so much for joining me all. Paul and Joe, thank you so much for speaking to us over the phone. Of course, this show is about you. So if there's a question you'd like answered, someone or something you'd like to see on the show in the future, or perhaps you want to share your thoughts on what's going on in your life, what's going on in the world, you can comment under this video on the YouTube. There's an email address as well, which we'll put in the description box. For now, we'll see you again next week. Until then, stick with your union.